1. Welcome into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. I see that my co-host has spent absolutely no thought into improving his background. We're still waiting for something, anything. But you know what? I'm sort of getting used to the sprinkler aesthetic he has going on.
Yeah, you may think I'm in jail, right? I mean, because there's really nothing
I
here
don't
that
know.
doesn't
It could
look like
be.
jail. Yeah, I could be in jail, actually. I'm calling you from, the Charles Street Jail, well, that doesn't even exist anymore. But, I'm at Cedar
No,
Junction.
I believe that's a hotel now, the Charles Street
It is a
Jail.
hotel, yes. The Charles Street Jail is a very high-end hotel.
Yeah, it's a nice one.
Yeah, I'm calling you from Cedar Junction. So, we only have so much time. They give me 2 hours a night to do a podcast, and then they put me back behind the cage. But I'm working on it. I think you gave me a really good idea that I should have my Mount Rushmore of favorite athletes, which would be Barry Bonds, LeBron James, Aaron Rodgers, and either Mario Lemieux or Roger Federer. Since we don't, in general, talk much about tennis, it might have to be Mario Lemieux. We, of course, only talk about basketball, but that could be something. Your background looks splendid. I like it. Looks
Thank
really,
you.
really good.
You've
got the professional microphone. I'm like talking into a cell phone, but it sounds okay. It actually sounds pretty good.
I think it's good. Well, you are in jail, so what are you supposed to do?
I'm in jail. Yeah, they're not going to let me bring a computer to jail. Yeah, I mean, I
was wondering why you're so specific about the times. It must be 6:30 when we record this. No other time works.
Dinner's at 6. Dinner is at 6. Mashed potatoes, corn, meatloaf. That's what we had tonight here in the can. And then, I have to be ready at 6:30, and I've got to be out at 8:30 because that's when lights are out. So get it going, Jet. Let's go.
It's funny to me because you're like the nicest, most helpful person I know. So the thought of you being in jail for some reason, just like, what could you possibly do? Jaywalk? That would put you in jail?
No, I actually got arrested and spent 3.5 hours in a jail cell back in 1996. I'm actually a convicted felon, if anybody cares to know. And I'm not being funny here. That is the case. I don't know if I should really say this because maybe our leader, Ian Glendon, would either, hire me full time because it sounds interesting, or would say I can't have you working for me. But we'll get to that some other point. We'll leave that as a tease to talk about me being a convicted felon. I can vote though. It was sealed, so I'm above that.
Was 1996 during your drinking days?
No, it was beyond drinking.
I was going to say that's why you ended up in a jail cell. That would picture it because I know you were a big drinker and you haven't. And since when? When did you stop? When was the last time you had a drink?
1992, December of 92. Yes, it was coming up on 29 years. So no, it had nothing to do with drinking. I was sober. I was just trying to make money, and they caught me trying to make money. But that happens. It doesn't help to have a vowel at the end of your name.
I was going to say, Sap, you shouldn't be so blatant about selling those tickets in front of the Garden that are no good.
Well,
they'll pop you for that every time.
It was essentially selling tickets, just different types of tickets. So we'll end it there. But it doesn't help having a vowel at the end of your name because as Italian Americans, we always consider the FBI as Forever Bother Italians. That's what it stands for.
I think that a lot of races would have that same gripe and would place the I with maybe a B for forever bothering black people or forever bothering, other people. But
except for Karl Malone, who used to wear the FBI hat. Another reason I'm not a big fan of Karl Malone's.
Female body inspector. That's what.
Yes, exactly. Well, that would probably be. That's more Deshaun Watson than Karl Malone.
No, Karl Malone has a lot of kids.
Yeah, he does actually. Yeah,
strange. He had one kid who was in the NFL that he never even met before.
Yeah, he was kind of like Antonio Cromartie and Sean Kemp, like the father of our country.
Yeah. So don't let Karl Malone off the hook completely with that. No. His seed is very virile. But we have immediately gotten off track. Although Karl Malone did play basketball, so something basketball adjacent there. You insisted. Well, I'll say suggested we start with the Celtics today, Sap, because there's just no end for the misery that is the 2020-2021 season if you're a Celtics fan. Now they've lost 2 straight, both in pretty grueling fashion. Mm-hmm. You want to know what my plan would be for the Celtics, but you put on the unfortunate caveat of Danny Ainge and Brad Stevens have to stay. So I have to fix the team basically with a 100-pound weight tied against my ankle. That's what you want from me?
Ball and chain, can we call it that? The reason I said that is I get the feeling that, especially Danny Ainge, he's got that job for life. I don't think Rick Grossbeck is ever going to get rid of Danny Ainge. I kind of feel the same way about Brad Stevens, but there may be heat on Danny Ainge at some point to say, well, it's either me or him, so it's got to be him. And then, of course, now with Roy Williams retiring at Kansas, now the rumors will start floating. Maybe Brad Stevens
UNC,
goes to
he
Kansas.
was at Kansas, and then now he's at
was
UNC.
at Kansas, at UNC. But also it could be that if Bill Self from Kansas goes to North Carolina, maybe Stevens ends up at Kansas. Now, people are trying to make some connection. The reason Roy Williams went from Kansas to North Carolina, because he's a North Carolina guy. He was Dean Smith's most trusted assistant, loved Michael Jordan. I'm sure that Michael Jordan will have some say in who the next Tar Heels head coach is. And they love to stay within the family. So, again, that rumor starts floating. Oh, Brad Stevens could be the new North Carolina coach, or maybe go to Kansas if Bill Self ends up at North Carolina. And this would piss off the people in Indiana because they pursued him and he said, thanks, no thanks. But the North Carolina and Kansas jobs are better jobs than Indiana.
Yeah,
now,
North Carolina is probably one of the 3 best jobs in college basketball.
I would say Duke, North Carolina, and Kentucky, probably the 3 best jobs.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah. And Kansas is probably at the top of the next tier. And then Indiana is like probably a 3rd-tier job at this point because it's, it's not Hoosiers anymore. It's not what it was when Bobby Knight
irrational.
was there.
It's like the Nebraska football fans. It's like they're living in the past.
Exactly.
It's not the way that it is anymore. But it's certainly intriguing. And happy trails, Roy Williams, terrific coach. Don't announce your retirement on April Fool's Day, you dummy.
True. Very true.
90% of people didn't believe it.
Yeah. No, I know.
Like,
I've
not
had
a good
this
day to do it.
I've had this happen to me on April Fool's Day back in 1984. And we're eventually going to get into the show. But, when you said April Fool's Day, so I was 21 years old, about to turn 21 in 1984. So at that time, my favorite player in the NBA was Marcus Johnson. So this is well before social media. ESPN was just ESPN. There wasn't ESPN2, ESPN3, ESPN News. So, news didn't travel. So at some point, friends were calling me because that's the only way you talked with friends was on the telephone. We didn't have cell phones in 1984.
You don't have to lecture us. Yes.
Okay. I'm just lecturing how old I am and how fortunate you are. But friends called me and go, hey, did you hear Marcus Johnson blew out his knee last night? He's done for the season. I'm like, oh, man, that's awful. I was like pissed off, because the Bucks were probably the 2nd best team in the Eastern Conference that year. They lost to the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. And then they got back to me and said, oh, April Fool's. Like, oh, that's right. Today's April Fool's. So 3 weeks after April Fool's, right around my birthday, I had tickets to see Al Pacino in American Buffalo at the Wilbur Theater in Boston. And Pacino's one of my all-time favorite actors. And actually, we share the same birthday, April 25th. He's 23 years older than I am. So I was looking forward to see him. The same friends called up a little bit later and said, hey, did you hear Al Pacino fell off the stage last night? His understudy is going to be filling in for the rest of the run. I'm like, oh, my God. I bought these tickets. I'm so psyched to see Al Pacino. They said April Fool's Day. Okay, I'm not going to fall for any more April Fool's Day jokes in 1984. Well, later that night, friends called me and said that Marvin Gaye was killed. And Marvin Gaye is one of my favorite all-time artists. And I would not believe it till like the next day when I saw it in the newspaper. Because, again, word traveled a lot slower back then.
Fool me once, and shame on
you. Right, fool me twice, shame on you. And fool me a 3rd time, shame, shame, shame. And Marvin Gaye was killed by his dad. And it was just like, I wouldn't believe it till I saw it the next day. So that was April Fool's Day, 1984. So you make a good point, though. Roy Williams probably should have waited until tomorrow to announce it, unless he didn't want to get it too close to the Final Four. But yeah, I'm sure a lot of people said, it's just an April Fool's joke. But he's leaving
still people in North Carolina just assuming that he's going to be there next season.
Yeah.
Just as a quick aside, a name to look out for, I would say, is Jerry Stackhouse. He did an okay job with Vanderbilt, but is an alum and very respected. Maybe he ends up there. I don't know. I'm sure that he would love the job. They will certainly inquire. And maybe they'll ask Celtic player Aaron Nesmith, who was coached by Jerry Stackhouse, hey, Aaron, what do you think of this guy? Which brings us to the Celtics. That's how I'm going to do it, Seth. Aaron Nesmith.
I like that.
1984 to Roy Williams, to Aaron Nesmith to the Celtics.
We're good, aren't we?
Separation. Very, very, very good. So again, you want me to do this with Brad Stevens and Danny Ainge staying. I agree with you. I don't think that Danny Ainge is going to get fired. I disagree that that's the right course of action, as I've made plainly clear on this show many times. But I do believe that Brad Stevens they will mutually part ways after the end of the season. They're not gonna can him. They're not gonna say they're gonna fire him. They're gonna say, we came to this decision together. It would be for the best of both. But you can just see it in the team's eyes. They don't listen to him anymore. They don't try. They don't respect him anymore as a head coach. I'm sure he's a very, very nice man. Everybody seems to say very nice things about him. He's not the right coach for this team. The players aren't responding, so they have to do something. But we'll go in this scenario with they both stay, because obviously they are popular with the ownership group. We know what Grousbeck has said glowing things about both of them. So what do I do to fix the Celtics, Sap? That is a very, very tough question with that scenario. I do feel extremely hamstrung. The first thing I would do is I'd have a serious conversation with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and say, hey guys, what do you think we're missing? Where do you think you guys can continue to improve? Do you think we need another star player who's better than you guys? What type of player would it be? You need to have a real conversation and say, hey, this isn't working. If this is what we're going to get, we're not going to be able to be competitive. So you need to have a completely honest conversation with those guys, as honest as you can. If you don't come away liking what you hear from that conversation, I think anybody is tradable, honestly. And so you have to see what players are available, but I'd have no problem trading Tatum or Brown for the right price. It's just a matter of if you do want to go in the direction where you're trading them to get somebody who complements the other guy. Because if you're going to trade them both, then you're just going to tank. But if you trade, say, Brown and you get Bradley Beal, that seems like the same thing. Bradley Beal's a better player than Brown, but he's not as good defensively. And I don't see that just Brown and Tatum suddenly turn you into a team that's a contender.
Jed, if you do that, now you've really empowered Jason Tatum, because that's his best friend,
Completely,
Bradley Beal.
yeah.
So now here's a guy who seems to be stagnant in his development this year. I think he was a better player at the end of last year than he is this year. The other night against Dallas, he was playing iso ball to the max. It was just infuriating to watch. There was one possession, the very first possession of the second half, where he had the ball for 22 seconds, went in the lane, floated it up, missed, and then he complained that he thought he was fouled. The other four guys went back on defense, and Jason Tatum was still complaining. And it looked like Carmelo Anthony, circa 2011 or whatever.
Yeah, really bad. That's a
really
good
bad,
comparison.
right? So it was very, very infuriating to watch. So now, if you reward him by going and getting his best friend, he's just going to feel that his shit is ice cream, right? At that point, like he's running the Boston Celtics, not Danny Ainge or Brad Stevens. So what about adding to the coaching staff? Because in this scenario, Brad Stevens remains as the head coach. Do you need to get a buffer in there that these players
I mean, I've been
respect?
advocating for that for years, but at this point, I think it's gone. I think last year they had their chance to bring in somebody like that, a former player, preferably a former black player, to the coaching staff, and they did not do that. So I think that ship has sailed, honestly. I think this season has been enough of a disaster, and the team has regressed so much to the point where there's no salvaging Brad Stevens as the head coach by supplementing the staff. The only thing I think you can do is if in this scenario where you're making me keep Brad Stevens, is you have to have some sort of roster upheaval. Because just trotting out the same coach, same players, same GM, same everything, that's not going to work. I don't care, what people think about Tatum and Brown getting better next year, or Romeo Langford or Aaron Nesmith improving, Rob Williams improving. This team, even if all those guys improve and take a step up, this team isn't going to be able to compete with the Nets as currently constituted.
No.
So you need to make some serious roster moves, and you have to sort of decide one way or another. Are we going to try to enhance the core of Tatum and Brown, or try to develop a new core, or start from scratch? Those are your three real options: is enhance what you have, restructure what you have in terms of, you trade one of Brown or Tatum, or completely blow it up. I don't think that it's hard to walk away from guys who are young and seemingly have a few years of their prime, a lot of years of their prime left, but you have to take a serious gauge of, one, what your return would be for trading something like that, and two, if you keep them, how do you get to the point where you're competing for a finals? Because that's really the only goal in Boston, is not to be a competitive team that gets into the playoffs, but a team that's competing for the finals. So you have to look at guys that would complement their games, and how can you go out and get them? To me, the best answer would be you try to do something like what the Nets just did to get James Harden and offer up a ton of draft picks into the future to get an all-star player right now, like a Karl Anthony Towns. If the Timberwolves are even interested in something like that, whatever the next star to shake loose would be, and offer just an insane amount of draft picks, because you don't have the player capital to add to Tatum and Brown. You'd have to trade one of those guys to get a player. But if you were offering enough draft picks like this Nets trade, maybe you could get another star player in, and then maybe you'd be considered a team that can compete for the finals. So that's the first thing I would look at. And if I'm not able to do that, I seriously gauge what the value is for Jason Tatum. Whether and the value I'm looking for is a lot of picks and maybe a young player. It's a bad situation the Celtics are in right now. That's the reality of it, is that it seems silly they have two young all-stars to say it's a bad situation, but they're in the situation that you really try to avoid at all costs in the NBA, which is the no man's land, which is you're too good to be trying to get a top tier talent in the lottery, but you're not nearly good enough to be competing for finals. And so if you're bringing back the coach and the GM who would have the same vision, what do you really do about that? That's where I'm kind of stuck, is that I would like to bring in a third star and trade a bunch of picks, but it takes two to tango in a trade. You can't just say that's what I'm going to do.
What about in terms of smaller moves? Because there's a chemistry issue, and I don't generally like to use the word chemistry. Uh, Maybe it's character, lack of leadership, whatever the case may be. But if you can bring in a veteran or two that have championship DNA, I'm going to throw one name out. I don't think he's viable anymore. He's almost as old as me, it feels like. But someone like Andre Iguodala, who could come in, has won 3 championships. So when Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown don't want to hear about how tough it is to win a championship, he can flash 3 rings in their faces. Someone along those lines who has that type of championship DNA. Now, you would think Tristan Thompson could bring a little bit of that, right? Because he did win a championship. But
yeah,
the players probably look at him. He hasn't brought any of it. And look, he's still in COVID protocol because he can't not go out. Like, that's not leadership. And you don't think the players look at him and go, yeah, you won a championship, but you played with LeBron and you played with Kyrie Irving. So congratulations, you were along for the ride. You're not going to go get someone who is a champion that's going to get moved to you, because those players are so rare. I mean, you can go get Steph Curry to come in and right all the wrongs. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen for sure. I mean, my fun scenario was in 2022, 23. LeBron James comes here to wrap up his career. But I mean, of course, that's, pure lunacy, other than me maybe having too much fluoxetine one day and thinking that that's possible. But you get my point, though, bringing in somebody who's got that type of ability. That's why I was thinking, and we both kind of agree, that a former player like Kendrick Perkins would be good as an assistant coach, because if Tatum and Brown act up, first of all, Perk is 6'10" and mean looking as all hell, even though he's a big sweetheart. But I think that he could, basically look and say, look, young fellas, I played with Garnett, Allen, Pierce, LeBron. I know what it takes to be part of a championship team. Sit and listen, follow my lead, and I can kind of help you. But Jason Tatum has this contract that goes into effect next year, right? For what, $39 million a year? Like
it's a lot of money.
He's basically untouchable unless they want to move him and probably not get as much back. I mean, he's got the Subway commercial with Draymond Green. He's pitching potato chips now, so he's like this big star. The girls like him. He's got
that's why I'm saying, Seth.
It's almost like he seems like it's almost like it's almost like a lost cause in terms of changing his approach at this point.
I do. That's why I think the ship is sailed again, to bring in the assistant coach, to bring in the veteran, because I think it sort of is what it is at this point. And like you said, the contracts are guaranteed, and the players are now established, and the Celtics have sort of been enabling this behavior for a long time. Again, it's not like they're doing anything wrong off the court at all. They're model citizens and good guys, and Jason Tatum seems like a great dad, and Jaylen Brown's a great leader in his community, but they're just not engaged on the basketball court and not showing the leadership that they need on the basketball court. And so, I think the only way, if you want to go the player mentor route, the only way I see it is a player mentor who's still good and still playing a big role in the team. So, and again, those players don't necessarily want to come to a team that's not in the mix for a championship, and they're not right now. So you have to find a player that's as good, if not better than both those guys, and add them to the team without giving up one of those two. And that's really the difficult trick, is trying to get another player that's an all-star level player to a franchise level player without giving up Tatum and Brown. That's why the Nets trade for Harden was such a heist, because they gave up, they gave up LeVert and Allen, which, those are fine players, but they really didn't give up much in the way of anything to acquire a top 5 NBA player. So that, and that's why the Nets are so good this year, is because they just added to that core of Durant and Kyrie and didn't have to subtract something that was really, really, they didn't have to subtract from the core.
Could they have traded for James Harden by offering the Rockets Marcus Smart, Robert Williams, who has grown as a player this year? So at the time, he wasn't what he is now. But say Marcus Smart, Robert Williams, a bunch of first-round picks, there would have to be one other role player in there. Because, look, the Nets didn't trade Kyrie or Kevin Durant for James Harden. Now, Kevin Durant's the best player of this entire discussion, and Kyrie's more accomplished than Tatum and Brown. I'll make the case he's a better player than those guys. He can take over a game easier than those two players can without making it look so obvious. So they didn't have to part with either one of those two players because they added this third superstar who actually has been their MVP. Jared Allen, his ceiling is probably higher than Robert Williams because he's proven it for a couple of years already. And I would think Karis LeVert's a better rounded player than Marcus Smart. But those 4 players aren't that far off. So if you could have got Harden for Marcus Smart, Robert Williams, one other young player, and 3 first-round picks, and if that was the case and Danny Ainge didn't want to do that, then that's malpractice on his part. Because anytime you get a top 5 player, you've got to try to make that move.
Yeah, I don't think they could have, because I think the Rockets are probably looking at the Nets picks as more valuable down the line because they are older.
Sure.
So I would say they probably wouldn't have done that but if they had offered Jaylen Brown, it probably would have gotten it done. But then you're in the same situation where you have Tatum and Brown. You have 2 guys. You kind of need 3. So listen, if that's what the Rockets wanted was Smart and, Robert Williams and a bunch of picks, and they didn't do that, then absolutely shame on Danny Ainge for sure.
And I doubt that was the case, because that would not be enough to get it done. Ainge probably proposed that, and they said, no, we need a little bit more. And then the trade died because Danny can't make deals. He has to obliterate the opposition when he makes a deal. He fights over a second-round pick.
I'm just looking, Sap, through all the teams in the NBA and what stars could shake loose. It's hard to, outside of Karl Anthony Towns, who everybody has, circled now, who's really going to shake loose that's going to be able to, you're going to add to that team and be super impactful. And I know that surprises happen all the time, but look at the star players in the league. They're pretty entrenched with where they are. Let's look at the top of the East. Those Brooklyn guys aren't going anywhere until they become free agents or whatever. Embiid and Simmons seem like that's working out. So, maybe Simmons gets moved, but the Celtics and Sixers aren't going to make a trade. Giannis just signed a big extension. He's not going anywhere. Jimmy Butler is getting older, and he's happy in Miami. Trae Young is the future of that Hawks team. And then you look at Bradley Beal, I guess could come loose, but is he really going to, change a team? Look at their record this year. Look at them, what they've been historically. And in the Western Conference, Devin Booker finally seems settled in Phoenix. Utah have their 2 stars extended for a while. The Lakers have what the Lakers have. The Nuggets, Jokic isn't going anywhere. Lillard's not going anywhere. Doncic certainly not going anywhere. Curry's not going anywhere. So, who's going to shake loose here?
The guy they should have approached in the offseason, but it would have been a very difficult cost, was Chris Paul. If you put Chris Paul on this team with Tatum and Brown, I think he would be the leader that they would follow, right? But now what would you have to give Oklahoma City at that point? And we know Sam Presti. Could you picture a trade between Sam Presti and Danny Ainge, what that would be about? One guy wanting to hoard draft picks, the other guy wanting to hoard draft picks. It'd be a tug-of-war between the two of them. They have made a deal before when Danny traded Kendrick Perkins for Jeff Green.
Lose-lose.
That's almost
deal.
a decade ago, right? It ended up being a lose-lose for both teams. So, that would have been the guy. You bring him in. Maybe you send Kemba Walker to Oklahoma City because then it's 2 bad contracts and whatever else you have to get. And Chris Paul to me is miles better than Kemba Walker because I think he's one of the best leaders in the sport, and he would, I think, put Tatum and Brown in their place. It may only last a couple of years because he does have a tendency to grate on people, but maybe that was the type of move. It's a difficult situation to be in. Someone has to get to Tatum and to a lesser degree Brown and let them figure out how to become leaders and make players on their roster better. They don't do that. Now, maybe they never will. There's not a lot of guys in the league that do that. Even if you add Karl Anthony Towns, what the hell has he ever won? Right?
No, he hasn't won anything. He's just hoping to acquire talent.
Yeah.
Again, that's someone that could be available. Yeah. I don't know that he will be.
I'm not saying it to you, but it's like everyone talks about Karl Anthony Towns. What did Anthony Davis win until he showed up with LeBron? I mean, that type of player is a great player. They're going to make the All-Star team every year. They're going to put up great numbers, but it doesn't translate into changing the culture of a team. You know, a Tatum and Brown going to really look up to Karl Anthony Towns. They're going to look and say, well, he's on the same level as us.
Right. You're just hoping that the collective talent sort of can outweigh that, I guess.
Right. And that's where you do have to make the coaching change because we've seen that Brad has trouble coaching, these elite players. If you throw another one into the mix, it could really get bad. So, I mean, that's what I know I hamstrung you on this by saying Ainge and Stevens are going to stay. I think Ainge is here. Ainge is going to dictate when he wants to leave. I think he's got a job for life. It does seem that way. It does. But Stevens, I agree with you. It could be at the end of the year where they mutually part ways and he goes on to coach college. The only problem is, let's say North Carolina is where he wants to go. Are they going to fill that vacancy now, or are they going to wait till the end of the regular season? Or can you pull off something like this? This happened in football a long time ago.
I would be surprised, Sap. He could end up coaching another NBA team too.
It could be a team, but
it could be a team that's looking to completely rebuild. And so
here's a scenario that doesn't generally happen. Charlie Weiss was the offensive coordinator with the Patriots in 2004, and in November announced that he was going to become the new head coach at Notre Dame. And Belichick let him stay on the staff. They won a Super Bowl, and then he parted ways. First of all, he was the offensive coordinator, not the head coach. I don't think you can do that for the head coach. I'm Brad Stevens. I'm going to coach you for the rest of the year, and then I'm going to North Carolina. They don't listen to him now. Why would they listen to him then when he's a lame duck coach? So I just want to throw that out there. And that basketball is completely different. I get that.
Yeah, in terms of also what I do for the Celtics, I forgot this one part is that I would come up with some sort of phony injury for Tatum and or Brown and just rest them the rest of the season. I honestly,
really?
they're close to being in top 8 pick territory, which gets you a 20% chance at the top 3 or top 5. I think if you're the 8th worst team. However, they flatten the odds.
They would really have to blow up though to not
go
make
for
at least a play in. Yeah, I mean that
I'd go for it at this point.
Whoever. Yeah, and then
because remember the bottom of the East is a lot worse off than the bottom of the West. So if you're finishing right now, they're in 8th at 23 and 25. Right. They're 2 spots ahead of Indiana. They're 2 games ahead of Indiana, and 4 games ahead of Chicago. The 4 games might be hard to swing. But
it's actually 1 game ahead of Indy and 3 ahead of Chicago.
Okay,
the Celtics are 23 and 25. Indiana's 21 and 25, so that's 1 game. So they're 1 game ahead of Indiana for 8th, and they are 3 games ahead of Chicago. But then, who's the 11th team in the Eastern Conference right now? I believe it's probably Toronto. Yeah, they're
18 and
further
30
behind. Yeah, so the Celtics are 5 games ahead of Toronto. So they'd have to lose 5 games to Toronto.
Yeah, that's too much.
Standings.
That's
too much. There's
3
only
is
24
doable.
games left. Yeah, I mean
3 is doable.
But if you're stuck at 10, now, I mean, does it work? This gets really complicated, but let's say they end up number 10 and they play Chicago in that play-in tournament and they lose. Are they now not qualified as a playoff team and they go into the lottery?
That's right. Yeah.
That's what happens. So yeah, root against them in that 1 game lottery. Hopefully they don't advance and, lose to, I don't know, Miami in the first round or whoever they would play, or Charlotte, or
so let's just
like that.
I'll give you the example right now, Sap. If they drop down to where this is via tankathon.com, by the way, it's a great website if you're interested in how these teams are getting lottery odds. So if they just say they flip-flop with Chicago and they end up in the position that the Bulls are in right now, you would have a 34% chance at the 8th pick, a 32% chance at the 9th pick, but you would have a combined just about 6, 12, 18, over 20% chance at a top 4 pick.
Yeah, I mean, and you get lucky, and as we will talk about in a future podcast, Cade Cunningham is a player that you love.
Doesn't matter.
Suggs is a guy I love, but
it doesn't matter the player. It's the asset of having the pick, and then you could swing it for a player if you wanted to.
You could swing it for a player, right? I mean, now you have that if you want to go after Karl-Anthony Towns, right? Although Minnesota is going to be involved in that as well, but certain picks are protected. Yeah, no, I mean, look, being where they are right now is the worst place to be in the NBA. Like, they may sneak in to the play-in tournament and lose that, or they may, even worse, win that and then end up playing the Nets. Play the Nets in the first round. I mean, how humiliating would that be?
Just waxed, just absolutely waxed.
You got Kyrie
every game.
basically laughing at Brad Stevens. Yeah, I mean, or if you play Philly, although we got to see how Embiid is, they're not going to beat any of the top 3 teams in the East, whether it's in the first or second round. So what's the point there? And it could be, a humbling experience for Tatum and Brown, because they keep throwing out there that Tatum's gone to 3 of the last 4.
How's the season not been humbling enough?
I don't know if these guys get it yet. I mean, I still think the worst thing that happened to Jason Tatum was his rookie year. He's in the Eastern Conference Finals, Game 7. He dunks on LeBron James, and it's like, okay, let's put this guy in Springfield. His career is all done. And oh, by the way, the Cavaliers won that game, 87-79, and LeBron did have 35 points, 15 rebounds, and 9 assists. So the last laugh was on Jason Tatum and the rest of the Celtics. But it's almost like, I dunked on LeBron. Kobe says I'm his guy. I mean, that's a lot for a 19-year-old, right? So he again, as I said earlier, he thinks his shit is ice cream. And you got to kind of coach that out of him. And he went to Duke, which complicates everything.
It's tough to coach it out of somebody, and especially it's not going to happen with Brad Stevens.
No,
so again, in this scenario, you're making me keep him. But either scenario, if there's a new head coach or not at the end of the season, I at this point, I've seen enough. Like the election prognosticators, at some point they say I've seen enough, and they can call it state. I know this team well enough. I can call when they're going to win or lose games. By
you start betting on them, you can make some money, right?
I should start betting on them.
Yeah.
They have 0 chance of winning in the first round, 0. So why are they doing this to themselves? I'm telling you, Jason Tatum. You could say COVID fatigue, whatever. Jaylen Brown's dealt with like a hip thing the past week.
A knee as well.
Shut him down. And less so
for 24 games.
In the next play 10 more games and then shut him down or something.
Okay, here's the other thing though, from a business aspect, because you got to weigh that also. They've started to let fans into the building, 12%. And
I know they want the playoff revenue, but
also, your business partners may say, "What are you doing here? You're tanking."
No, I'm not saying this is what they're going to do, but I'm saying this is what they should do. This is what they should do.
Okay, well, so you're a very aggressive executive. That's what I like about you, Jet. You would take over.
Yeah, well, I'm smart. I would know how to run the team. Well, let me ask you this, Sap. How is what the Thunder are doing with Al Horford any different than tanking?
Yeah.
I don't.
Exactly.
They're admitting it. I don't know how they're not being fined or anything. They're taking out a guy who's been one of their best players this season and saying, "We're not going to play him. He's not hurt. We're just not going to play him."
And it wasn't like he was going to be bought out to go to another team. He's just
they won't even buy him out. Right. So
that's a problem. I'm surprised the league hasn't stepped in on that, because that's a non-competitive approach by Oklahoma City. Yeah, you have a great point. Yeah, I mean, I'm up for anything so that they're not stuck in this purgatory where, they're the thing with the Celtics right now is the bridge years with Isaiah Thomas and Olynyk and, Marcus Smart had a big role. That was at least was enjoyable to watch. They were underdogs. They weren't as talented as other teams. Brad Stevens looked like one of the 3 best coaches in the league.
Yeah.
I mean, and now here you are, you've got 2 young studs that you think are going to be, great players, and neither one has been consistent showing that. And I think we saw that more this week. And I think this week has made it more frustrating, Jet, because Zion comes in and beats you, and then Luka comes in and beats you. And as good as Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have been, they both made the All-Star team this year. Tatum made it the year before as well. They're not as good as those guys.
No.
They're not. I mean, Luka Doncic is at another level from those guys, and I think
I said this,
Zion is headed there too. So
we
it's
were
kind of
texting
frustrating
about this, Sap.
Yeah,
that I wouldn't if I would trade Brown and Tatum combined for Doncic, but the Mavs would say no.
Yeah, I mean he's special, isn't he? I mean he's just a
They'd say
special
no.
player. He's a generational talent, and I think Zion is too. So this week you got Jason Tatum essentially, hogging the ball, a la Carmelo Anthony, and you got Zion and Luka helping their teammates play better, and they beat you on your home court. That's a bad look for the Celtics and Jason Tatum, because I think his Q rating among maybe other players, although other players seem to like the kid, but I think it's going down a little bit. His Q rating off the court with Subway and Frito-Lay or whatever the hell he's selling for potato chips, that's going up. But
it's been
at some point you got to win.
It's been an incredibly revealing season for Celtics fans who thought that could be the core of a championship team: Tatum and Brown and Kemba. So and I'm looking at the rest of their schedule, and because of the way they've played this year, Sap, I mean, you can't say any game is you could chalk that up to a win.
No.
Like tomorrow against Houston, I'm willing to say, okay, they'll win that game. They play 2 against Minnesota, and then the rest of them, you're like, well, they could lose any of those games. Maybe not to Orlando. So 3. I have 3 games where I feel very confident they'll win. One of the 2 against Minnesota, Houston, and Orlando. The rest of them, I don't know. I have no idea. Like they're playing the Knicks twice remaining. Why would I be confident they're going to beat the Knicks at this point?
The Knicks
or the Hornets. Or the Hornets.
Knicks are better right now. Julius Randle is a better player right now than Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. He's playing at a higher level than those two guys.
He's making his teammates better than they are.
Just look at his assist numbers.
They've got a bunch of junk in New York.
Yeah.
So
and Thibodeau's
it's bad.
It's
bad. There's no easy fix, Sap. But I think I think that an aggressive fix would be to do what I said, try to tank a little bit this season. You can't get super far down, but you hope that you hit the ping pong balls, which historically the Celtics haven't really gotten luck with. But that's what I would do. And another thing that I talked about this months ago. If you want to go in a really weird sort of tanky direction, you could go trade Tatum to the Wizards, who they obviously would love Bradley Beal and Tatum to be there. Get Westbrook back, so you're be competitive now. Get their 2 of their young players, Hachimura and Avia from Israel, and a bunch of picks, and then say, Brown, those 2 young guys, Westbrook, a bunch of picks. We can rebuild from there. Tatum will be happy playing in Washington. You could go that route, and I'm sure the Wizards would be amenable to that trade because they'd like to pair Tatum and Beal. So that's something I could look at. But that you're starting over there. But it's got that same sort of vibe to me as those Bridgie Celtics, where you can be competitive, but you also can look to the future because you have younger players and picks coming your way. Just an idea.
No, yeah, I mean, it's good. You got to throw all the spaghetti up against the wall and see what sticks. Kind of reverse it. Instead of bringing Beal here, you send Tatum there.
Right.
Look, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was traded in his 6th year. Anything is doable in the NBA. That's when people say, this guy is untouchable.
No, there should be no such thing.
It's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in 1975 was by far the best player in basketball and by far the best asset in basketball. There's not a lot of 7'2" guys that were skilled as Kareem. I can't count more than 2 on my hands, and that's him and Will Chamberlain. And they traded him because he didn't want to stay in Milwaukee. They tried to get as much back as they could. So when people say, well, Tatum's untouchable or Brown's untouchable, BS. Everyone is tradable at any moment because Kareem, one of the all-time greats, was traded right in his prime. So, yeah, look, if that works, you do know Westbrook is going to bust his ass out there. I don't think he is the player he was before, and then some of the things that make him infuriating to watch still exist. He's a poor 3-point shooter. He seems to play in a tunnel, but you do know that the guy's going to bust his ass every night. And then if you're getting young players back and a load of draft picks, then you just root against Washington and hope that you get a lottery pick or 2 in there and you start to rebuild. I think at some point they're going to have to shake something up, whether it be the coach, which is probably the easiest thing to do. In fact, it is the easiest thing to do, or move on from one of your 2-star players, split them up at some point. Because right now this is not enjoyable to watch. That's
no, it's
that's
awful
the part
to watch.
that's even
Really,
worse.
Sap. It's awful. It's
It
like I
is.
said, it's a slog. Every game is like a nightmare. They don't learn their lessons from the past games. They don't do the things that would make them a good team. They're young and fast and athletic, and they don't run. They play this like half-court game. They huck up threes. They rarely go to the free throw line or try to attack the basket. It's an awful brand of basketball to watch. Really, they're a thoroughly unenjoyable team to watch. I was saying on my post game recap last night on the YouTube channel, YouTube/Jet Stryer, that it's like an abusive relationship they have with their fans, where they're doing just enough to kind of keep you on the line. Like, oh, they made this comeback, they fell just short. Like, go and look at what the Celtics tweet out after every game. It's basically the same thing. It's like, oh, the Celtics spirited, or the Celtics really tough, gritty effort, comeback falls just short. They've tweeted it like 30 times this season. It's basically the exact same
Are
thing.
they aware the game is 48 minutes? It's not 60 minutes like other sports. I mean,
so I'm saying, like, they're leaving you. There's like giving you just enough. Like, well, they really tried. Well, they didn't really try. They just that's recency bias. They tried the last 2 minutes of the game. If they tried the whole game, they would have won by 15 points. And so it's like the stuff in the offseason where it's like, you don't want Miles Turner and Doug McDermott. You want this traded player exemption because we're going to get a starred player. And then it's, well, look at what the value we got for Evan Fournier with this traded player exemption. They lie to you. They keep your fans. I'm telling you, Sap, it's an abusive relationship the Celtics have with their fans right now, where they're selling them things that is just an absolute bag of goods. Danny Ainge has become a snake oil salesman. The Celtics media have just come along for the ride. They've become, in my mind, in this town, the worst media group because they're just the least honest with the fan base. So
absolutely.
It's a problem.
And just some of the people who cover them, even, on the periphery. I was tweeting back and forth with someone today, and talking about Klay Thompson. I don't even know who it was. I think he's a half-ass fan. Everybody covers the team somehow. They got a blog or whatever. But there was a picture of Klay Thompson when he was a young kid, and it said that he was a Red Sox fan. And I said, oh, yeah, Steph Curry also was a Red Sox fan. And someone in the Twitter exchange said, oh, that means it's a done deal, Klay to the Celtics. I said, oh, that would be awesome. But Danny wouldn't part with Marcus Smart for Klay Thompson.
Yeah, probably
and someone
not.
Jumped down my throat. Maybe it's a burner account of yours. But someone jumped down my throat and said, I would never trade Marcus Smart for Klay Thompson. He's had knee problems. I said, Klay Thompson could walk up and down the court and be more effective than Marcus Smart just because he's one of the 5 greatest shooters ever. I think Klay Thompson's going to come back from these injuries. He's not a guy who creates his own offense. He doesn't dribble the ball. His usage rate is probably the lowest in the league. He gets open and hits threes. It's pretty good. But this, again, I think that's the mindset of the Celtics. Marcus Smart, I couldn't part with him for, Klay Thompson. And that trade scenario I ran by you of Marcus Smart, Robert Williams, draft picks, maybe a younger player, I bet 90% of the people that cover the Celtics, whether in, print or on radio or in the blogosphere, whatever,
right,
would not have made that trade. Oh, no, you can't give up Marcus Smart and Robert Williams for James Harden. James Harden, he's a Han. He's an MVP who's in the running this year, and look at what he's done with the Nets. That's talent. Talent wins in that league. And whether you like James Harden or not, he does get his team to the playoffs. Now, once they get there, they don't go as far as you think. But, he did go 8 straight years with Houston. He was blocked several of those years by Golden State like everybody else in the sport. These guys have not proven that they can be the guy. They were at their best when they had other players who, were more accepting of those roles. When they were like the cute young kids, in their first or second year, and you're like, wow, these guys are going to be awesome. It was kind of fun to watch. But now they've gone from kids to men, or at least they think they have, but they haven't really delivered the goods yet.
I just figured it out on the trade machine, Sap. Kemba Walker, which Jason Tatum and Tristan Thompson. So you're dumping a bad contract in Kemba Walker, but you're getting a bad contract in return. Russell Westbrook, Ryu Hachimura, Denny Avdija, and however many first-round picks you demand from the Wizards. Boom, trade done. I just made the Celtics competitive while getting good young players and a bunch of future draft picks.
And best for you, you didn't part with Marcus Smart, right? Because that's not going to happen if you're making any trade.
And I get Russell Westbrook, who I also
like.
Man,
you'd love that team, wouldn't you? Imagine Smart
I don't
and Westbrook
honestly
on the court together.
Trading Kemba, Tatum, and Thompson for Westbrook and those 2 young guys, are they any worse this season honestly, are they any worse this season with minus Tatum and Kemba plus Westbrook?
Well, Westbrook's still putting up ridiculous numbers. It hasn't translated to any wins in Washington, but you know
They're
what?
in 8th
Tatum and
place
Brown
right now, so are they really
they
worse?
haven't translated to wins either. Yeah, no, it's look, you come from the Rick Pitino school of just shake things up as much as you can.
Don't compare
Danny
me to
Ainge
him.
comes from, well, best coach in college basketball, bar none, is Rick Pitino. Look at what he did. He's got the Iona program heading in the right direction. If BC had any balls, they would have hired him as their next head coach.
God, they'd never do it.
They're not bringing Rick Pitino back to Boston. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting to bring those points up. But again, Tatum is tantalizing, right? Because he's so damn talented. I mean, there's times out there he looks like Tracy McGrady. But let's also remember Tracy McGrady won what? One playoff series. There are some guys that are wildly talented, that put up great numbers, but it just doesn't mean anything.
Here's my overall point, Sep. They need to pick a direction. Are you going to go in the direction where you're going to go for it? If you're going to go for it, sell out, trade your picks, trade your complementary pieces like Marcus Smart, who I love dearly, but if it's going to get you a guy that you think you're going to contend for a championship with, do it. Sell out, compete for the championship, or go in the other direction. Do a complete teardown and start from scratch. Don't do what they're doing now, hoping for a wing and a prayer and trading player exemptions and Tatum and Brown growing and the coach growing with the team. Don't do that. That's not going to work. So this is ultimately, as a GM or somebody who's running a team, you need to pick a direction and then commit to that direction. The Celtics picked the direction of Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving. It didn't work. They have then decided to just, play it as is, see what comes to us. You need to be aggressive and pick a direction. And Danny Ainge hasn't done that. So that's whether it's trying to compete for a championship right now and selling all your draft picks and your complementary pieces, great. If it's tearing it down and trading Tatum or Brown or both and getting a bunch of picks or younger players, great. But don't do this because this is torture.
There's an old expression, shit or get off the pot.
Yes.
You like that one?
Yeah,
I summed up what you had to say in like 6 words.
Yeah.
So no, that's absolutely the truth. Absolutely. So it's a bad place to be in.
Yeah, it is, and they need to make some massive decisions this offseason, and I hope that they have the balls to do it. Really, I do. But I have my doubts. We were going to do some other stuff, but I want to move it to the next podcast. We've gone and done a lot of stuff on the Celtics. So I just wanted to ask you one quick thing before we finish this podcast, which is, does DeMarcus Cousins going to the Clippers on a 10-day contract actually make a difference?
Boy, that's a surprise question. I've always been a DeMarcus Cousins fan. I have. I think his game is fascinating. He's a big guy that's skilled. He's never really been in the best shape, which, is caused a lot of these injuries. He's got those old man injuries that have just crept up. I also think he's been so frustrating with losing. I think that's why he would act out, especially when he was in Sacramento. I mean, his teammates and even the organization spoke highly of him in the community and so forth. But look, he looks like he's really cooked. I mean, there were times a couple of years ago when he was with Golden State where he would flash, right? And look, he's going to a team that's loaded with talent. So if he can accept a role of I don't know, 12 to 15 minutes a night as a spark occasionally, maybe it works out. But it is a surprise that he's only getting a 10-day contract. A player of that ilk, you would think would sign for the rest of the year. If it doesn't work out and he gets released, then someone else may give him an opportunity. But it does look like he's seen better days, and the injuries have really crept up on him. But it's a shot in the dark. The only thing I will say is with Rondo there now, and I know they had a good relationship in New Orleans. New Orleans actually won a playoff series when they had Rondo, Cousins, and AD. Maybe that gets the most out of him. I think the move of getting Rondo in the Clippers was the most underrated move of the trade deadline, because he really hasn't played much this year. But
a lot of players think that too. Draymond Green was saying as much as well.
That was a great move.
Probably tampering again from Draymond Green, but
Draymond's pretty active all over the place.
Well,
but I think.
Seth, the reason I asked you the question is, one, I wanted to get an actual news story in here, and two, I think that Cousins is it plays well to what I was saying with the Celtics in sort of pick a direction, is a guy that was constantly talked about for going to the Celtics for years and years and years. And ultimately the Celtics decided to not, to maintain the status quo and not commit. And, maybe it worked out for them because Cousins got hurt, but you don't know if he plays here, if he gets hurt or not. So
sure,
he's just another guy that reminds me of what the Celtics could have been had they gotten aggressive about trying to compete for a championship. The only time in Danny Ainge's tenure that he's been aggressive in trying to compete for a championship was the Garnett trade. Really?
Exactly. Yeah, pretty much it. I mean, the Isaiah Thomas trade was under the radar. That wasn't
trying to compete
move
for a championship. That was just making a move he thought was smart. But I'm talking about an aggressive, let's go out and get it move. And so
that's it.
Cousins, every time I think of him, that's what it reminds me of, is what could have been had he been in his prime and the Celtics went out and aggressively got him. I don't know, but we'll never know.
No,
I also don't think he's going to help the Clippers for whatever.
No, I mean he's like what, 31 going on 41, because
it's not an attitude thing or motivation thing either.
No.
I just think he's physically cooked.
Body breaks down, especially at that size, a big man, and he's had a lot of injuries. And I've always liked the player. I really have. I think people misread his competitiveness. I think he wants to win. It's just sometimes you're in situations where you don't win, and it's frustrating.
Yeah. So I think that, we'll probably see him, I would guess, not get a second 10-day contract, but I don't know. And, I'm frustrated with the Celtics, Sap. That's the real takeover from this podcast, is that I've racked my brain, and the best solution is to be aggressive one way or the other. And like you said, shit or get off the pot. I fully agree with that. So that being said, we are the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. In our next show, we're going to talk not about the Celtics, thank God. We're going to talk about some interesting social media feuds, because the NBA, they do a lot of things well. They do this better than any league going. They do this better than TMZ. Social media feuds are the NBA's bread and butter, and we got a good one. So make sure you check out that. Check out the podcast on fullpresscoverage.com, and other great podcasts and articles are on fullpresscoverage.com. We're also up on YouTube. Like I said, youtube.com/JetStryer for the video version of this, if you like looking at us. We're not doing like interesting things, but you can look at us and engage. You can pretend when we're looking in the camera, we're looking deep into your eyes. So yeah, check all that stuff out. Again, we are the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. See everybody. Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. I'm Jet. That handsome gentleman across from me virtually is Sap, or John Sapichetti, whatever you want to call him. Sap, do you have a nickname that people would prefer outside of Sap? Did anybody ever call you something?
No, mostly Sap, and I like that, actually. There's obviously family members don't call me Sap. I'm the youngest of the family, so it's usually John or Johnny. I don't like Johnny, but obviously if my sister or brother call me Johnny, I'm fine with that.
What's wrong with Johnny? Johnny Flynn?
I don't like it.
Johnny Carson?
Yeah, no, I did not know that, Johnny Carson. But I like Sap among friends. It's something I have always been called, and I embrace it. So Sap is just fine.
Okay, Sap it is. I knew that, but I wanted our dedicated viewers to know that they could feel comfortable calling you Sap. They don't have to call you Mr. Sapichetti. As I know a lot of people, that's what very common on Twitter. People just say, Mr. Sapichetti, what do you think about this or that? They're very polite.
That's when they think I'm old. Yeah, they think I'm old.
So I teased this in our last podcast because it was very Celtic centric, but we're not going to go there today. Thank God. I don't want to talk about the Celtics anymore. It's a mess. We're going to talk about something the NBA does fantastically well, which is social media feuds. And I'm not talking about the Kardashians and Tristan Thompson and that sort of social media feud where it's sort of fake and, made for cameras. I'm talking about some real life bad blood between a comedian and one of the best NBA players in the history of the sport. That's right. Michael Rapaport, former employee of Barstool Sports, current stand-up comedian, I guess. He's on shows too. I guess
he's not funny.
Comedian's a good catch-all, right?
I guess so, but he's not funny enough to be a comedian.
Versus
he's not
Kevin
good enough
Durant.
to be an actor.
Him and Kevin Durant, they have some serious social media beef. Sap, is this a feud that before these DMs that Rapaport released to the public came out? Is this a feud you had any idea was this on your radar screen?
No, the only feud I know that Michael Rapaport has had in the NBA is with LeBron James. He claims to have been friendly with LeBron and then said LeBron snubbed him at some point. So now he goes on all these shows. He's on Fox Sports 1 a lot. Yeah, LeBron's kind of busy doing other things besides dealing with Michael Rapaport, who I think is like one of the least talented guys out there. He also looks like Brian Scalabrine, Pastor Scalabrine's older brother, a guy who tries to put out a vibe that he grew up in the mean streets in New York. His dad was an executive at a major radio station. His mother was a radio personality. He comes from affluence. He did not grow up on the mean streets of New York, the same way that David Portnoy did not grow up on the mean streets either. In northeastern Massachusetts, he grew up in Swampscott. His dad was an attorney. And I know Portnoy and Rapaport have had their feuds, but I at least really admire Portnoy for the point that he took nothing and made it into something. Rapaport is like famous for being famous. Like he's really not a good actor. He's been in a lot of movies. I think he sucks as an actor. I don't think he's funny. And he shows up on Fox Sports 1 a lot. He'll go on with Skip and Shannon, and they give him time, and he just, is a Yankee Knicks fan and Giants fan. So congratulations, you're in New York. Wow, God bless.
You have just buried Michael Rapaport. Does it bother you to know that he's worth $12 million?
Yeah, probably. Like, again, you step in enough shit, sometimes you come out smelling like a rose. I mean, he's made movies, he's whatever. So that was the only feud I had known about. I guess he and Durant were somewhat friendly. And
I guess, according to Rapaport, again.
Yeah.
I'll read the DMs because they bear reading. I'm not gonna read them verbatim because I'm not gonna try to get us demonetized with all the swearing and terrible words that went on. But I'll read some of it. I'll pick and choose my spots. So for some bizarre reason, Rapaport decided to send the receipts of these DMs between him and Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant, a known Twitter-holic, also a known very, very sensitive person who will not let any snipe at him go unresponded to. So here's how the DMs start. It was a post, actually, that Michael Rapaport on the 22nd of December put out saying, KD seemed deeply in his feelings with the NBA on TNT crew after the game. Damn it, he's super sensitive about everything. Don't do the interview. That is a response to, I think we actually talked about it at the time, Sap. It was one of the first games back. It may have been the first game back of the NBA season. And the Nets had won the game. Durant was the guy that TNT decided to interview because it was his first game back in 2 years. And, they were asking him questions. He was just giving one-word answers. And you could see that it was very uncomfortable. He didn't want to answer the questions. He doesn't like Charles Barkley. We know this. And it was just a weird interview. So that's what that was in response to. Durant decided to, in response to that, direct message Michael Rapaport and say, or text him and just say, you a bitch. Okay. Rapaport responded days later saying, just do the bleeping interview. And if you're upset about something they've said, say something. Up there looking like you were going to cry and bleep. And then Durant, again, never going to let somebody get the last word, said, I did the interview, you blankhead. Tell your baby daddy Chuck to be better at his job and frame his questions better. He gave me 2 options for that dumbass question, yes or no. And then Rapaport did an interview where he's saying, I don't know why they're asking for this idiot's opinion. So he just continued to rip Durant, I believe. And then Durant really unloaded on him. He said, I've heard it all before, you C-word. Chuck doesn't need you as a security, you pale, pasty, blank, guzzling bitch. I swear I'm going to spit in your face when I see your dirty ass. Bet your life on it. Meet me on West 17th tomorrow at 10. Or better yet, what's your address? 10 a.m. at Catch Steak on the corner. Meet me there. Then he called him a bad word for a male genitalia, or female genitalia. Rapaport decided to say, go help the kids in Brownsville and Brooklyn and stop being a blanking, again, bad word for female genitalia. Durant said, you're a bitch for even caring about how I do an interview. All you do is blank suck other men for attention. Trump didn't pay attention to your sorry ass. So now you want to use everybody else to get views and laugh. Your life is a joke. You bleeping pale blank sucker. Go get some sun. It's blanking with your brain. Piece of, you can infer the rest. Go to Brownsville, help the people, you goofball. Then Durant said, you go, you clown. Good for you. Nobody gives a bleep. Suck a bleep. I can't wait to tell you all this in person. Then he's mad that he called a lawyer. Durant gets mad at Rapaport for calling a lawyer. That is the extent of it. What is going on here, Sap?
This is middle school, isn't it? I mean, I'm actually, I don't even think it's to the levels of middle school. Maybe what's before middle school, elementary school. And Durant has a way of screwing things up because you want to root for him against Michael Rapaport. At least I want to. But by the end, I'm rooting against both of them.
Right. Well, Durant came over the top here. Rapaport was just like, jerking him around saying, yeah, you're being like a baby about this. And then he was like, then Durant, the NBA might have a problem with this because it's so homophobic. Over the top homophobic.
And there's actually racial slurs in there with the pasty white. If the tables were flipped and Rapaport had said about
his career
Durant, would be a massive
Rapaport's
problem.
career would be over.
Yeah, so you with whatever's left of it, like I don't even know who he works for. He kind of is an independent.
You told me Fox Sports 1.
Well, yeah, he shows up on with Skip and Shannon, and they prop him up. And Lil Wayne's a big Packers fan, so I like Lil Wayne. But yeah, the issue I have with this is, first of all, Durant's not playing, right? He's played 19 games the last 2 years. He obviously appears to be bored. Even when he was playing, he was constantly on social media. The bigger problem, I think, with Durant is, and you don't necessarily see this with, say, LeBron or Tom Brady or adults like that. They don't get involved in this as much or anywhere close to what Durant gets involved with this because they have families. They have like other things to do. Does Durant go to his house and just sit there with his cell phone like many of us do and then interact with everybody on Twitter? Like he's got nothing else to do besides fight with people on Twitter. He's got his burner accounts. He's fighting with like high school kids. Like they're baiting him into a discussion, right? And this is one of the greatest players in the history of the sport. I think he's one of the top 20 players in the history of the sport, the second best player currently playing. You stoop yourself to the level of Michael Rapaport or some kid in high school, just ignore it, But the thing is, I don't like what Michael Rapaport did because these are DMs or texts. Don't go public with this because now you look like a rat. And that's not a good place to be in.
He's a huge loser, Michael Rapaport.
But that's sort of going at it.
But that's sort of his MO, right? Nobody thinks highly of Michael Rapaport. So ultimately, he wins in this situation. People are talking about him. So he did the right thing for his career, I guess, because people are talking about him.
Why would we talk about Michael Rapaport other than he looks like Brian Scalabrine?
That's what Durant's never understood is that unless he engages, nobody's going to ignore. He's seeing things from middle schoolers and high schoolers that two other people are seeing. If he doesn't respond to it, nobody else is going to see or care. The funniest thing to me with the language and stuff like that and the homophobia is he has if you look at his tattoos, they're all like Psalms and Christian tattoos. It's like,
right.
I can't. But that's not a Durant thing. That's a everybody thing. He has responded and said, "I'm sorry that people had to see the language I used." That's about as sorry as he is. It's ridiculous that he's so sensitive, and now he's trying to play it off like, oh, we were just joking around. Me and Mike talk crazier than this. We're joking around and stuff, but like no one believes that because, like you said this before. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Durant has a history of doing this. He has a history of burner accounts. He has a history of engaging with people on his own account. He can't help himself. And what's so crazy to me, Sap, and what I just don't understand is that this is a guy who has accomplished so much and is considered already one of the greatest players in NBA history. Why is he so sensitive?
He's sensitive to the fact that he's never going to measure up to LeBron James, right? So that was his goal, to equal or surpass LeBron James. It ain't going to happen, whether on the court or off the court. It's just not going to happen. So he's not comfortable not being the best player. And then, of course, when he went to Golden State, won back-to-back titles, joining a super team, everybody pushed back on him. So, he's got 2 championships, 2 finals MVPs. But a lot of people put an asterisk next to those 2 championships, right? Because as we've said before, not all championships are the same.
No.
LeBron's championship in Cleveland feels like it counts for more than one because they came back from 3 games to 1 down.
Of course, yeah.
Doing it
some
in
you
a
have
city,
to really earn. Yeah, the Warriors, like some of them were just like they were just ripping through.
It looked like an exhibition game at some point. So it's almost like, he went and joined a 73-win team to win a championship. Then he won another championship and probably would have won a third if he and Clay didn't get hurt. So he's never been loved. Even when he was in Golden State yet, that was Steph Curry's team. That's Steph Curry's team because Steph was, drafted by the Warriors. He set the culture. And Steph was such a good leader that he was able to get out of the way and let Durant be the guy at times.
He was beloved and probably the most popular player in the NBA when he was in Oklahoma City because LeBron had at that time done the decision and everybody was mad at him. And they were a team trying to knock off that Warriors team. That was, again, nobody really hated the Warriors at that point in time either because they were built organically. And I think there was a sense of Durant could really, they made the finals already with that team and they brought the Warriors to 7 games. They could win. He could break through with that team. So why not try to do that? And then it's just been all downhill for his relationship with fans since he left the Thunder. And this year could have been good too, but then they added James Harden and they became the enemy of everybody. So it's just never going to happen for him. But yes, he's never going to measure up to LeBron James, but he's a guy who's won an MVP award. He's a guy who's won 2 titles. He's a guy who's going to be in the Hall of Fame. He has, hundreds of millions of dollars, a shoe deal. Why can't he just be happy? Why? Not even that. Why can't he just refrain from engaging with everybody who says anything nasty about him on Twitter? It's just like, again, and people will push back and say, well, if you're in his shoes, maybe you'd feel different. I know for a fact I wouldn't. When I was on EEI and I would do on-air stuff for them and people would write nasty stuff to me, I wouldn't give 2 shits because I was where I wanted to be and doing stuff that I wanted to be doing. I don't care what their opinions are.
But Jet, here's the thing. Oftentimes money and power makes you more of who you are. He's insecure. And there are a ton of insecure people in this world, whether they're the most successful at what they do or not. So even though he's made a ton of money, he's accomplished a lot, all of that makes him even more insecure. And I think when he was in Oklahoma City, he got very frustrated with Russell Westbrook because there were times, many of those years, Westbrook was actually taking more shots than Durant, which makes no sense to me. So I'm sure he got frustrated. And then when they blew that 3-1 lead to Golden State in the 2016 Western Conference Finals, I think he just checked out at that point, that I can't win with this guy, ends up going to Golden State. And the rest is history. Remember when he gave his MVP speech with his mom there? That was one of the most touching speeches I've ever seen. Whether it was getting into a Hall of Fame or winning an MVP. Remember, I think it was the same summer when LeBron had the decision to go play in Miami and everybody was railing against LeBron. I think a few months later, or maybe it was even sooner, Durant re-upped with Oklahoma City, and he did it with a tweet. Staying in Oklahoma City, that was it. And it was like, wow, this guy's really handling everything differently than LeBron. And now I think LeBron is certainly the more respected player and has done so much off the court. And Durant's done a lot off the court too. Durant's put a lot of money out there, to help with education. He did so much in Oklahoma City, as did Russell Westbrook. So he's
become a punchline, Sap. He's become a punchline because everybody knows he's so sensitive.
Does he want to be the heel now? And he's not cut out to be? Like,
no,
I think Jordan and Kobe liked being the man in the black hat, right? They were very comfortable going into a visiting arena, having people booing at them and rooting against them, and them tearing your heart out. Barry Bonds loved playing in opposing ballparks with 55,000 people booing him. He said, this is so cool.
Tom Brady's done it for most of his career.
Tom Brady does it too. Some guys don't like that. I don't think LeBron
I don't think Durant likes it. I don't think Durant likes it either.
I don't think LeBron likes it either.
He's not leaning into it. Durant's not leaning into it because if he was, he wouldn't care with what people were saying about him because he can look at his accomplishments and stats and be like, if this guy on Twitter who's, living in his mom's basement or is a high school senior saying I suck, I've won an MVP award, 2 finals, look at my stats. I don't suck. How can you be so insecure to when people are ripping? Because a lot of these people, this Rapaport thing is calling him a baby. which
Right.
obviously he is. But the other stuff that he gets engaged on are like people criticizing his game. How can he be insecure in his game? He doesn't get enough praise, and he hasn't accomplished enough where his game can speak for himself. He doesn't have to defend his game, but he can't help himself.
Yeah, because there's really no critique of his game. I mean, could he be a better rebounder, passer, defender, whatever? But
people throw that out there just to get at him now because they know he'll see it.
Well, can you picture, like, he's scrutinized, but LeBron's scrutinized on steroids, right? I mean, LeBron's the most scrutinized athlete in the country. You either love him or hate him. I mean, do you think LeBron is watching Skip Bayless all morning when Skip is just throwing out so much bullshit? I think he just probably has other things to do. If that was the case, Durant would be watching. I think
early in his career, probably, but now I don't think he cares.
Finally grew up. He grew up because LeBron has a lot of other interests, right? He's married. He's got 3 kids. He's got multiple businesses. He's a busy guy, right? So he doesn't have time to sit and get on social media and fight with people who follow
him. And again,
him.
he's accomplished so much, Sap. I think he at the point is like, what's Skip Bayless gonna say? It's the same thing as like, what's the guy who keeps calling Tom Brady the luckiest player of all time? I'm forgetting
he's on Fox Sports
his name.
Yeah,
but anyways, it's like Tom Brady's not going to pay attention to that because it's ridiculous.
Rob Parker calls him the LOAT.
So it's like,
luckiest of all time.
When a guy like Tom Brady or LeBron James, and Kevin Durant's not that level, but he's still a level where you've accomplished so much in your career at this point. When people just come at you, you should just laugh it off. Brady and LeBron don't pay attention to that stuff anymore because it's stupid. It's not an argument. No one takes it seriously. Like if somebody is going to say, Kevin Durant's not that great of a basketball player, no one actually takes that seriously except for Kevin Durant.
No. Right. Yeah. It's like he doesn't have to prove
anything. That's what's
anything.
amazing to me. He's the only person on the planet who takes it seriously and like an actual slight.
He does.
It's no one realizes. It's the guy who doesn't realize that the joke is on him. He's defending himself from all these imaginary armies.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost, what's the term you use? It's a straw man argument, right? Like they're just throwing out nonsense that makes no sense. No one believes what they're saying, but it's almost like Durant's being bullied on Twitter, and rather than ignore it, he feeds into it. And that Adam Silver talked about this last year during the shutdown, that he doesn't understand and he wants to find out why his players are so unhappy. He goes, these are young guys making plenty of money, got great brands, wildly popular, and so many of the guys are unhappy. And he thinks a lot of it has to do with social media, that they're so connected to social media that, it kind of sets them off. Now, Kawhi Leonard is kind of the other end of the spectrum, which I don't even know if Kawhi has a cell phone, but he's, not really listening to what anyone says. He's kind of focused on his own little thing. He doesn't really, what is his brand? The Claw. And he's got, what sneakers does he sell? New Balance. Yeah. I mean, he was going to be the king of LA till LeBron won another title, but that's the other end of the spectrum. Is like, I really don't care what Kawhi took a year off, essentially.
I don't think Kawhi has hurt. A TV. Yeah.
I know Kawhi, they were saying he was driving like a pickup truck. I mean, Kawhi still wears, braids or dreadlocks. I mean, he's like a little behind the times, right? So I think that he's a completely different guy than Durant, who seems to hear everything. He's got rabbit ears.
Completely.
Everything.
But the thing is, like, Sep, with these guys, when you're this level of professional athlete and you got to have a lot of self-confidence.
Yeah.
But this is like is like a complete lack of self-confidence. That's why I can't rationalize it. Like, to get to this point, you need to be confident in your abilities. If you're second guessing your shot making, your shot taking, your playmaking, you'll never make it in the NBA. He's made it, as well as maybe you can list 30 people who've made it better than Durant at this point in his career.
Can't.
History of planet Earth.
Yeah. No, I think he's top 20 player.
And then on social media, he has no self-confidence. It's bizarre. It doesn't make it doesn't make sense to me, Sap.
It doesn't make sense, but there are some athletes, I think a lot of them do have insecurities, but they channel it in the right direction.
Like does he not know how good he is at basketball?
Yeah, I mean, maybe no one told him it, but all he has to do is maybe watch some of his highlights and go, damn, I'm pretty good. I'm 7 feet tall and I can score from anywhere, within 40 feet of the basket. Like Kobe and Jordan had this massive chip on their shoulder, but they fueled it through anger to beat you. I think Brady does the same thing, but I also think that Kobe, Jordan, and Brady were sociopaths are sociopaths.
They're psychos.
There's something a little bit different than them than the average person. Durant's probably a really nice guy. He's probably good with his friends. And players seem to like him, right? They all go to him. I mean, Kyrie loves playing with him. Harden wanted to play with him. He seems like a good kid. He respects his mom, and that, like I said, that MVP.
No, he said as much. He's like, I'm a normal guy. I like Twitter and video games.
He likes video
talking
games.
about basketball and social media, but like,
stay away. But you know what? He can't help himself. It's unfortunate.
And like Rapaport again, didn't the initial thing? What he said, it's like everybody was saying that about Durant. Like, that's a lame answer. But Durant's response to it being a lame answer is, so what? That's how I felt. I didn't want to answer the question. Not go on a tirade calling people homophobic slurs. And
no, that's not good.
Like, that shouldn't be the response.
I mean,
because at this point, he's not a kid anymore. He's in his 30s. He's an adult.
Yeah. He's accomplished a lot. I mean, look, Kobe got fined for screaming out homophobic slurs at an official years ago.
Yes. Yep.
I don't think anything's going to happen here because, it was kind of supposed to be done in the privacy of DMs or text. But Donald Sterling lost his team, rightfully so, but lost his team by what he was saying, what was supposed to be a private conversation. So that's
you should assume nothing is private if you're a professional athlete now.
Not anymore, or any of us. Nothing.
Look, I mean,
just don't say anything.
And then the other spectrum, with Durant didn't do anything that was illegal. He just looks like a baby. But like with Deshaun Watson, what you're seeing right now probably is like, that stuff is not private. You might DM somebody privately. It can be used against you in a court of law. It's not actually private. It's just under a privacy setting on your computer. So
exactly.
Advice for anybody in a professional setting: don't assume anything's private. If you're DMing somebody on Twitter, don't assume that's private. Don't say something you wouldn't say to them normally. It's just this stuff on social media is not private. Anybody has access to it. It doesn't take
much. No, and stay away, Kevin. And I think once he gets back to playing, maybe it will rectify some of this.
He's not going to learn. This will come up again, Sep. Before his career's over, this will happen multiple more times.
Because players have idle time, even while they're playing, right? They're on the road, they're in their hotel room, whatever the case may be. Everybody's social distancing, so they're on their own. And look, as long as he has a cell phone with him, which we all have at all times, he's going to engage, and that's not good.
Yeah, so it just was another example of, I think, heightening people's perception of Kevin Durant, that he's immature and that he's a baby and just extremely sensitive, and making the Nets more and more unlikable by the day, to a point where people are going to be, I know the Lakers are the most popular team in the NBA, but typically the team that's trying to repeat doesn't get rooted for in the playoffs or in the championship. More people will end up rooting for the Lakers than the Nets this year. Because
absolutely.
They might end up being the underdogs in that series in terms of what Vegas looks at it with.
Probably. Yeah.
So
probably
somebody who's dealing with this stuff a little bit better, Sap, is Durant's former teammate in Oklahoma City, Russell Westbrook, who also hears the noise and heard some noise recently from Stephen A. Smith, who's one of those people who throws things out there. He is maybe a little bit more tactful than Michael Rapaport and probably knows
more talented,
more about what he's talking about.
I like Stephen A. because he's covered the league for years. I know he's the face of ESPN along with Mike Greenberg and probably Scott Van Pelt. I like Stephen A. Smith. He does his job really well. And again, those shows, whether it be on ESPN or Fox Sports 1, they're on for 2.5, 3 hours. They have to say things. They can't just sit there and go, wow, that was a great game by Russell Westbrook last night. Yet another triple-double.
Yeah. So Stephen A. more or less said, okay, Westbrook, triple-double. You're playing really good basketball right now. You're still not winning. Where's your rings? What have you done for me, lately? And do I have that more or less correct, Sap? What
Pretty
Stephen
much,
A. said there?
Yeah, I want to hear about your chip. And it kind of set Russell off, but Russell handled it a lot better than Kevin Durant because he actually spoke about it.
Yeah, instead of what Kevin Durant did, Westbrook had a lengthy statement. I think they were asking him about it, and he went on for about 2 minutes. I don't want to read the whole thing. But more or less what he said is, listen, I'm happy. Quote, I was a champion once I made it to the NBA. I grew up in the streets. I don't have to be an NBA champion. My legacy is what I do off the floor, how many people I'm able to impact and inspire along my journey. And he went on to, just basically espouse that and say how it's unfair that a lot of guys, especially he was mentioning college guys who are being talked about right now because of the tournaments going on, who guys like Stephen A. Smith have never known or met or talked to, and they're spending a large portion of their nationally televised show speculating about them and what kind of person they are and what kind of player they will be, and sort of the whole nature of the media player relationship. And I think Westbrook was really eloquent and made some great points about it. And I think that Westbrook understands Stephen A. Smith's role and doesn't begrudge him what he's doing, but is saying that, that stuff doesn't bother me because I feel like we were just talking about Durant. He feels a lot of self-confidence and he has no reason to not. If his career ended tomorrow, he'd be in the Hall of Fame. He's won an MVP award. He's been to the NBA Finals. He's averaged multiple triple doubles. He's he's one of the most popular players in the league, regardless of what you think about him. His jersey sale is always one of the top jerseys on the market. So he's saying, listen, I've already won. And I think that's a really healthy attitude to have, because some people like Kevin Durant can't take any criticism, even though look at where he is now versus when he was growing up in Baltimore. And Russell Westbrook was growing up in LA. And he says, look at where I am now. Well, Stephen A. Smith can't say anything that's going to bother me. I feel very happy about it. So it's just a complete difference in terms of how they respond to stuff like that.
Well, because I think Westbrook by nature is aggressive. So I think he takes things head on. But he handled this really well by saying, look, I haven't won a championship, but, I've made money. Look where I came from. Look where I'm at. I can provide generational wealth for my family. These young guys that are coming through the system, if they're high draft choices, they can do the same. We're champions that way. No, we haven't won a championship in the NBA, but there's a lot of great players that didn't win a championship in the NBA. Look, Elgin Baylor died a couple of weeks ago. I think he's the greatest player to not have an NBA championship. Does that make him less of a player? Hell no. Barkley and Karl Malone and Patrick Ewing are probably the three most recent players that have retired that didn't win a championship. And right now, you got Westbrook and Harden are probably the two best players in the league, or at least for a period of time, that haven't won a championship. But I think their lives are pretty good. Their lives are pretty good. They're happy where they're at. And I know Westbrook was very charitable when he was in Oklahoma City. And the one thing with him, he's going to bust his ass every night. You're going to get 100% effort from him. So if you're a fan and you pay $125,
he's got a cute kid too. He's happy. He's a family guy.
He's widely popular. His sneakers sell. He's got a great brand. Has he won a championship? No. I mean, how many times did he really get close? They went there once in the finals and they lost to Miami, which was a better team. And they did have a 3-1 lead over Golden State in 2016. And he played like crap in games 5, 6, and 7. But so did Kevin Durant. So they both could share some of that blame. But Westbrook, he doesn't speak often, but when he speaks, I think you have to listen, because he's a serious guy. I mean, we can admit to that. He's a very serious guy.
Yeah.
And I was kind of happy with what he had to say. But I think the part with Stephen A. Smith, I hope he understands that's kind of Stephen A. Smith's job.
I think he does, because he wasn't completely blasting him, calling him
not at all.
So I think he gets it.
Durant would have went in a completely different direction and called whatever. And like with Charles Barkley, doesn't like Barkley, so he gives the one-word answers. Draymond Green and Barkley have had their problems, but you remember when Draymond Green was on there? They had good back and forth, because Draymond Green actually is someone that can kind of think on his feet and is I think, going to be fantastic on TV when he retires.
Yeah, I think that it's, Westbrook basically had a really eloquent 2-minute answer saying, I don't really care what Stephen A. Smith has to say.
Right, yeah.
It's been more or less what he did.
I'm comfortable with who I am.
Which I think for a lot of athletes, I think that's probably how they feel too, is, I grew up poor, or I grew up not wealthy. I made the NBA. I'm just so happy to be here. I was just watching this show on Netflix called Last Chance U about East Los Angeles Community College, the basketball team there. And these guys are trying to get to Division I programs. And that's their dream, just getting to a scholarship for Division I, and where they came from. And that's, oh my God, if I could just get this scholarship to a Division I school that you've never even heard of before, their dreams would come true. And that's true. And these guys have made it to the NBA and are making money. I think they really could care less about what Stephen A. Smith says about them. So
yeah, they've made hundreds of millions of dollars.
I do think Westbrook is probably speaking for a large portion of, and there's guys like Durant, plenty of guys like Durant too, who are sensitive, but I do think a lot of them are just so happy to be there and just so happy to be putting on an NBA jersey and now playing in front of fans again and getting to have thousands of people cheer for you or even cheer against you. that's an awesome feeling. I think
at some point it's a dream come true, right? I mean, when you're 8 years old, you want to be
and you're
there.
like Stephen
A.
Smith. Someone's talking about me on TV. I don't care what they have to say. I mean, unless they're talking about something that in my personal life and that's crossing a boundary, like something, then they're ragging on my game. So what? I could do. Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant would beat Stephen A. Smith in a game of one-on-one every time until they could age 50 years today, and Stephen A. Smith could be the same age. They beat him when they were 100 years old. So I think that Westbrook obviously handled this a lot better, and I think that it's interesting to look at these two different types of responses and say, well, what do you think is the more common feeling amongst players? Is it, I'm so happy that I've gotten out of this bad economic situation I was in, I'm living my dreams, and no one can really bring me down, I'm already a champion, like Westbrook said? Or is it Kevin Durant, who is miserable about everything?
I think there's more players. Well, it depends too. I think when you look at the superstars, and Adam Silver did talk about this, that a lot of the great players don't seem happy, which is kind of perplexing. But again, I don't know what they go through on a daily basis. And again,
you said this before, Sep. The European players seem to be the happiest guys in the league.
They get into the NBA. They're comfortable staying with the same franchise. Like, look at Giannis. If Giannis had been
he's happy as a clam.
States, but that same player who came through AAU and played 1 year of college would have gotten his ass out of Milwaukee as quickly as he could. But the foreign players, it goes all the way back to Dirk Nowitzki, they really appreciate that some team took a chance on them. And to the point where, like, they show loyalty to that particular team. Whereas more of the players now are like, I'm going whenever I want. I mean, LeBron set the tone for that. He's made the league so mobile. I mean, like I said,
it's like,
he may go to one other place.
Look at Giannis, and he hasn't won a championship. He's won 2 MVPs, and he's come up short in the postseason, and people criticize his game all the time. He doesn't seem to care at all. Again, like I said, he's happy as a clam. He's got a friendly relationship with the media. Yep. He's playing with his brother. His other brother is in the NBA. He said last night the Lakers played the Bucks, so all three Antetokounmpo brothers were on the court at the same time. He said, this is the biggest accomplishment, best thing that's ever happened in my life. Not the MVPs, not winning in the playoffs. This right here. And you could tell he's being honest about it.
They grew up in Greece, poor, selling, like watches in the open markets. So they came from absolutely nothing. And now they're all making a ton of money. Obviously, Giannis more than his brothers. He's probably wakes up and pinches himself every day. But I think Durant, I'm not going to say he was spoiled, but he was, the top recruit. He was the second pick in the draft. And, he was a star right away. So I think sometimes they get bogged down by that. In the prior podcast, we talked about Jason Tatum. I don't think Jason Tatum looks like he's having a blast out there.
No, he looks miserable. Completely
He looks miserable as well. So it's like, what's the problem here? Maybe the foreign players, because they don't come with the same publicity as the American players.
Maybe.
Luka's maybe a little bit different because we kind of heard about Luka when he was 16 playing professional basketball, but Luka looks like he's having a blast out there. That's why I think Zion is going to be the face of the NBA, because he's an American player.
Or maybe he'll be miserable at some points.
I don't think so. He seems to have the personality where he's having a blast. I think if he can get away from Stan Van Gundy, maybe he won't become miserable, because that's just a bad matchup in New Orleans. Like, I have no clue why they hired Stan Van Gundy,
but like you said
as the coach. But Zion
Durant,
has that personality.
You said that people, when he was in Oklahoma City and he sent out that tweet, everybody like, oh, this guy gets it. He seems like he's having a blast. So it changes.
It does change. But again, I think more power, accomplishments, and money make you more of who you are. And he's at his core, he's insecure. And it's unfortunate because he's so damn good.
Embiid, another guy, looks like he's having a blast every time he plays.
Some say too much of a blast. Like, he doesn't take it seriously enough, but he's a personality.
Jokic has fun all the time. You see him skipping around the court the other day in warm-ups. I'm drafting an all-European team. I don't want to deal with these guys. The other guys are pain in the ass. Kevin, why should you have to coddle Kevin Durant and say, hey, don't listen to what that 12-year-old's saying on Twitter? I mean,
it could be the English-speaking countries are bad too, because technically Kyrie was born in Australia. He was born in Australia, and Ben Simmons as well. And Kyrie, I get the vibe with Kyrie that he's like a tortured artist out there. Yeah. His game is his game is fantastic to watch, whether you like the guy or not. Ben Simmons, also from Australia, he doesn't look like he's very happy either. But
No,
you know,
I think he actually doesn't love basketball.
I don't
so
think
I think
he
it
does.
might be
I
for
think
a
he's
different
just really
reason.
good at it. Yeah, that's why we both like LaMelo Ball a lot, because he's having a blast out there. More so than his brother Lonzo, who I think so much pressure was on Lonzo because he was the
Oldest
first from the
child.
family,
Yep.
oldest child, went to the Lakers, and Magic saying, yeah, his number's going to be up in the rafters someday, and that's a lot of pressure to put on the kid.
Way too much.
LaMelo goes to Charlotte as the third pick, and you're like, well, he's not going to do much, and until he got hurt, he was the runaway choice to be league rookie of the year. So he seems to have fun. I think that's where the face of the franchise, the face of the league has to be. There's different ways you can paint this. Like Jordan was Jordan. I mean, come on. It's like that he broke the mold, but like Magic looked like he was having a lot of fun, but Bird was this intense guy, and that both worked for both of them. Dr. J was poetry in motion. LeBron kind of rolls a lot of this up into one.
It's impossible to compare these guys though, because there was no social media in the 80s.
Right. I mean,
prior to 2008.
Yeah.
It really wasn't a factor.
And these young players grew up with this. So that's what they know.
It's directly tied to it, Sep.
Of course it is. Absolutely. I mean, Jordan doesn't even have a Twitter account, right? He doesn't do it, I don't think. Magic
just the Jordan brand Twitter account.
Yeah.
He doesn't have one. No, Magic's Twitter is the most
comical.
What do you say? Salad or egg salad? What's your expression? Something over
chicken
toast.
Over salad.
Grilled chicken over salad. Yeah, that's Magic Johnson's Twitter.
No,
it's not insightful.
It's almost like a column Larry King used to have in USA Today, and goes, what's great on a summer day is lemons flush. It's like, no shit, like all obvious
Magic
stuff.
Johnson's Twitter. The Lakers just won their 17th championship.
Wow, thank you, Magic. I wasn't aware of that. Yeah, I'm assuming if you follow Magic on Twitter, you probably watched them win that 17th championship. So, but I still love Magic. But I don't think Bird's on Twitter. Bill Russell is, which is pretty cool.
But Bird doesn't have a computer.
He doesn't. He probably doesn't get cable either. But he's too cheap. But yeah, I think a lot of these guys, it's in some ways, it's like they're so successful, but they don't seem to be generally happy. And again, the commissioner knows this. So I think, and since he's the best commissioner in sports, Adam Silver, I think that he's going to try to work to fix this. But that seems to be a much more difficult problem to fix.
Here's my idea.
We're human beings.
Quick fix. The NBA creates a lot of burner accounts, but they're positivity burner accounts.
I like that.
Accounts that just tweet very nice things about their players. Wow, that Kevin Durant's something, isn't he? Just, have a server farm in India or Bangladesh where all they do all day is tweet very nice things about NBA players.
I like that.
Problem solved. All right, Sap, let's end the show with the next generation of unhappy players. In the Final Four right now, we've got Houston versus Baylor in an all-Texas matchup. Kendrick Perkins, very happy about that. And then Gonzaga versus UCLA in the matchup nobody saw coming, with the overall 1 seed against an 11 seed who was the first 4. So an interesting Final Four, because you have a 2-1 seeds, a 2 seed, and then the 11 seed. I'm assuming you didn't have UCLA in your bracket in the Final Four.
No, I had them losing to Michigan State in a play-in game, because actually, if there's one team I generally root for,
it was an overtime
Michigan
game.
State. They did lose in overtime. They were down double digits at halftime, so they're in there somehow. They're the miracle team. Look, Gonzaga is going to try to become the first team since the 76 Hoosiers to go undefeated through the regular season and postseason, and I think they're going to do it. Jet, they're 30-0 this year.
Yeah.
They've won 29 of those 30 games by double digits.
Yeah,
they've had one game where they haven't won by double digits. USC is a pretty good team, right, with Evan Mobley, who's going to be a top 3 or
beat
top
Oregon
4
pretty
pick.
good.
They destroyed them, 85-66.
They crushed Kansas too.
They've crushed everybody. So
and then I'm saying USC crushed Kansas.
USC
and
was
Gonzaga crushed
basketball.
USC. Yeah.
And that game was over. It was 25-10 about 8 minutes into it. So I would think Gonzaga is going to seal the deal. The only team that I think can give them some problems would be Baylor, because they have a really good backcourt. And the key to Gonzaga is Jalen Suggs, who I absolutely love. I mean, if the Celtics could ever get him, which is not going to be the case unless they get into the lottery and win it somehow, or tank and get a high pick, and I think he'd be a great leader for them. The thing I like about Suggs is he's was heavily recruited as a quarterback by Alabama and Ohio State. He was football player of the year and basketball player of the year, Mr. Basketball in the state of Minnesota. He's got those leadership qualities that you can't really teach. He's a quarterback, so he kind of has all of that. Corey Kispert's a guy who I think is going to be like a Kyle Korver type. Jalen Suggs reminds me a little bit of Jason Kidd, like a really hard-nosed defender, going to get better as a shooter, excellent passer. Baylor's got some guards. I know Davion Mitchell is probably someone you like because he's got a little bit of Marcus Smart in him. He's a really good defender. The only way I think Baylor's going to beat Houston and play Gonzaga in the championship, if their guards can really choke down on Suggs, then maybe that holds that Gonzaga offense down. But to beat Gonzaga, you have to score 80 points. They're cracking 80. Right?
By my count, Gonzaga has 4 guys who are going to be drafted in the NBA. Suggs, Kispert, Ayayi, and I think it's Drew Timme. I'm not sure how you pronounce
the guy with
his
the porn mustache.
Yeah. Typically, teams that have that much NBA talent, it's hard to beat them. I mean, those teams win the tournament a lot of the time.
And they're not all freshmen either. And Kentucky will roll out 6 freshmen.
They're not all freshmen. No, Kispert's a senior. Yeah. And Ayayi is a junior. Suggs is a freshman. Yeah. Mark Few is one of the best coaches in the country.
By far.
The only pushback I would give for Gonzaga, not in terms of where they are this season, which I think is pretty head and shoulders the favorite to win and the best team in the country, is that they do play in the WAC or the Western Athletic Conference, or is it the WC? I forget what it is. WCC, West Coast Conference. They shouldn't be playing in that anymore because they are constantly recruiting top 5 classes, top 10 classes, and they're just pounding their competition, and that's resulting in a top seed every time. So it's not really super fair what they're doing. They should be playing in the Pac-12. They should just add them, and they should be playing the same conferences: Oregon, Washington, USC, Colorado. All those teams. That's I think what really should happen. But meanwhile, this formula has worked really well for them. They ripped through their conference typically, except for the 1 year Patty Mills was at St. Mary's, and they get a high seed, but they've disappointed. Like they've gone to the Final Four before, or they've gone to the Elite Eight, and they've come up short. They've had really good teams in the past. This team looks like by far the best one.
They played in the national championship game in 2017. North Carolina beat them in the championship game. It's the only time they went. This team does look special, again, because it's got experience, right? And that helps. You saw what like Villanova did in winning 2 championships in a 3-year span, where they had some upperclassmen. And that can work. Kentucky's model of freshmen, that can work as well. Although that's like playing roulette,
team, right? But you could hit.
The 2015 team, as good as it was and was undefeated, going into the 2015 Final Four, we all thought Kentucky was going to seal the deal and be the first undefeated team since the 76 Hoosiers.
They were
feel
insanely
the same way
loaded.
About Gonzaga. They were loaded. I mean, you had was Booker on that team to go along with Karl Anthony Towns. I mean, you got 2 all-stars in the NBA now. So. But this team seems like it's so well constructed because of that experience. Their offense is beautiful to watch. I mean, after watching the Celtics with Jason Tatum playing iso ball and then watching Gonzaga with cuts and intricate passes and backdoors, that's really exciting to watch. And
I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked if they lose. I'd be genuinely shocked.
Too. I mean, they're a 14-point favorite.
Well, it's
over UCLA.
Here's the makings of a championship team. They have every part of it. They have experience, top end talent with Suggs is a top end draft pick, a really good experienced head coach, depth, guys who have been in the tournament before. They have everything that you could want. By the way, that Kentucky team, Devin Booker, Willie Cauley-Stein, the Harrison twins, Aaron and Andrew, both are in the NBA. Trey Lyles, Karl Anthony Towns. That is a pretty good team.
I think Booker was coming off the bench, Jet. I don't know if he started for them.
Yeah, I think he was coming off the bench.
Coming off the bench.
That's and then they had a couple of guys too, like Dakari Johnson, who did play in the NBA. Alex Poitras did play in the NBA. It's like guys who were in the NBA for a cup of coffee, but they were also on the team.
They were like the 8th and 9th guys. I mean,
they were. That was a ridiculous team.
You don't remember the 91 UNLV Running Rebels because you were 2 at the time, but I'm sure that's a team you would have loved because the team with attitude and played great defense. You had Larry Johnson, Stacey Augmon, Greg Anthony. They went undefeated, got to the Final Four and lost to Duke in the national semifinal. A year after they destroyed Duke in the national championship game, everyone thought that UNLV was going to win. But this team, I think, is almost unbeatable, especially now where there aren't many teams with upperclassmen and they have them. I mean, Kispert's a knockdown three-point shooter. Suggs is a great leader. He's going to find a way to beat you.
I'll tell you how you beat them, Sap, is that, well, you can never count out the one-game elimination factor of it.
Right.
You can have it.
And
Doc Rivers has said this a million times. Basketball, it's a make-miss sport. He says it's a make-miss league. With the NBA, college, it's the same formula. It's sometimes you're just off and you're not hitting your shots.
And they're college kids. They're not pros.
And they're college kids. Yeah. If Baylor can beat them if they hit their threes, that's how you could beat.
Right.
If you have to knock down your threes at an insane clip to beat them. And it's possible to do that for one game. If the NCAA tournament was 7-game series, Gonzaga would smoke everybody. And no one would have a chance. But in one game, team gets hot from three, you can beat them. But I'd be shocked. I mean, we're completely discounting UCLA and Houston here. We've not even talked about. And Houston is extremely well coached too by Kelvin Sampson. UCLA extremely well coached by Mick Cronin.
Yep. And his dad up in the stands.
Is contractually obligated to show his dad every 2 seconds for any UCLA game.
He's 22 years younger than Sister Jean. So, he's a spring chicken compared to Sister Jean with Loyola Chicago.
But good for UCLA to get there. I mean, that's incredible. First four to Final Four.
The last time they made the Final Four was Russell Westbrook and Kevin Love in 2008. And they didn't win the national championship either. Yeah. The thing about Gonzaga, I want to see how they react if they're down. It almost feels like Alabama in college football. Like Alabama was never down. That's why, Mac Jones, everybody loves. Well, he never faced a deficit. How is he going to react to his first game in the NFL when he's down 10 points going into the fourth quarter, which is going to happen? So what is Gonzaga going to do if they're down 8 at halftime? If that's the case. Now, the biggest upset in tournament history, as far as I'm concerned, well, there's two of them. NC State beating Houston in 1983. Houston had Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler. And NC State had talent, but not to that level. But that was before the shot clock, right? So you could control the pace. Same thing with Villanova beating Georgetown in 85. Control the pace, limit possessions, stay close, get a lead, hold on. There's a shot clock now, and the teams play at a very fast pace. Gonzaga plays at a very fast pace, and Gonzaga's both is good on both ends, Jet. So if they're not hitting threes, they're bringing the defensive effort, right? So I think it's going to be really difficult to beat them. I'm rooting for them because, again, they're a blue blood now, right? Because
would this be the biggest upset in the history of the tournament if UCLA takes them down?
Oh, sure. They're 14.5-point favorites. I mean, UCLA, where they finish in the Pac-12, they lost their last 4 games. They lost their last 3.
Second to last team in. Oregon State won the tournament, the conference tournament. So they weren't getting in otherwise. But UCLA was they were one of the first 4 teams. So they were in the middle of the conference.
UCLA lost their last 3 regular season games, lost their only tournament game in the Pac-12, and it was down double figures to Michigan State. I mean, talk about Cinderella.
Yeah, they're a bubble team.
This would be a huge upset, an enormous upset. The names sound weird, right? UCLA is the gold standard, or was, but it hasn't been for the last decade. I mean, they've really been.
No, Gonzaga's been the far better program,
without question. So I'm actually rooting for Gonzaga because I'm falling in love with Jalen Suggs. I just like him. I just think he's going to be a fantastic NBA player. He's just someone that I like. I mean, when I see the guy was a quarterback in high school, the point guard, really good student, seems like a mature kid. He's easy to root for. So
right now, Seth,
rooting for Gonzaga.
He's destined to be a Timberwolf, a Piston, or a Rocket, or a Magic. How do you feel about rooting for one of those teams?
Minnesota could be interesting, though, because if you pair him up with Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, he's from Minnesota. I think he'd be the alpha dog on that team, although Anthony Edwards is pretty much an alpha dog,
Anthony
too.
Edwards. Yeah, he's calling out other players. Last night he called out RJ Barrett, saying he can't shoot.
That was pretty cool. He goes, well, we were happy he took the last shot. As long as
I like Anthony Edwards. He's growing on me a lot. I like
he's got that could be a pretty fascinating team because Karl Anthony Towns is not an alpha by any means. He's a kind of like Anthony Davis, really nice kid, but doesn't have that killer mentality. I think if Jalen Suggs goes there, maybe I'm overrating Jalen Suggs. I mean, I'm comparing him to Jason Kidd, for God's sake.
But a lot of people do.
But I think that's the type of player. I think he's a guy who can impact a franchise because of his leadership ability. And again, the football component really impresses me. Quarterbacks tend to have that type of cachet. And I think that would be a good place for him to land. I mean, Detroit, name another team, like you said, Orlando, that would not be good at all. So maybe he gets lucky, goes to Minnesota, and is able to create something there because they do have some talent.
Houston, boo. That's the team I'd least like to go to.
He may go and see if he can play football at Alabama or Ohio State and go by the way of being a quarterback, which is a quick way to make a lot of money. You know, you get that.
So I'm going to say you have Gonzaga over Baylor. I'm going to assume we have the same finals.
Yeah, Baylor.
I had that as my finals. By the way, pat myself on the back. I had that as the finals, but I mean, I think a lot of people did there. The 1 and 2
a lot of
seed
people did.
I
had Illinois. I thought Illinois was going to make it to the Final Four, and they lost to Loyola Chicago in the second round. Baylor's been the second best team this year, right? I mean, they had a little blip because of COVID, so they had a shutdown, but they've been the second best team.
It's incredible that they got into this point because if you know the history of the program, that they basically got the death penalty in the early 2000s because of there was a murder. There was a straight up murder in the Baylor basketball program in the early 2000s.
A lot of strange things in Baylor. Same thing with the football program.
As an awful. Yeah. So it's incredible that they're back to this point because they basically lost all their scholarships and they've rebuilt this team to it. I mean, the past couple of years, they've been a really good team. Even going back 8-9 years ago, they had guys like Perry Jones, and they've been a solid program. So I think it could be an entertaining game. But if Gonzaga plays up to how good they have played, obviously they haven't lost a game, they should be able to run away with it.
They haven't even been in a game. I mean, again, all their wins but one by double digits. So that's the only way. If Baylor, and again, we're putting Baylor against Gonzaga in the national championship game. If Baylor can keep it close, maybe get a lead into halftime, and then you got 15 minutes to sit in your locker.
Got to knock down your threes.
You got to knock down your threes. That's the great equalizer in college basketball. If you're hitting threes and the other team isn't, you can make inroads. And again, if you have a lead at halftime, put a little doubt into Gonzaga's mind.
Yeah,
but
got it.
I think Gonzaga is the type of team that will come out in the second half and blow doors out because they're that good.
Right. Like I said, top end talent plus guys who have been there before.
Yeah.
In the tournament. Coach. Mark Few, great coach. There's no. If they didn't win, it would be a massive disappointment for the Gonzaga fans and for the program who's looking for their first national championship. All right, Sap, that's going to do it for the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. You can check us out and other great podcasts and articles on fullpresscoverage.com. You can check me and Sap out on Twitter at JohnSap25, at Jet Stryer. We always tweet out the link to the podcast. We're also up on my YouTube channel for the video version of this podcast. It's youtube.com/JetStryer. Those usually come up pretty close to when the podcast comes up, but we tweet those out as well. So make sure you stick around for that and see Sap's really exciting background that he's been working on very, very, very diligently.
From the jail cell.
Yeah, from your jail cell. All right, everybody, we will see you. Enjoy the Final Four. Enjoy your weekend, and we will talk to you early next week. See you, everybody.